Good evening and welcome to Coach World TV. My name is Terry Yoffe, and tonight as my guest I have Ted Taylor. Hi Ted.
Hello Terry.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Good. I'm really pleased to have Ted on my show tonight. We've known each other about a year or 2 years, and a lovely person, and I asked if he wanted to be on the show, and he said yes. So Ted is a life coach and positive psychology practitioner, and we're going to hear all about that. But first, I always like to ask, when was the aha moment when in your career you decided you were going to go the coach path?
Great. Well, I guess my story is pretty much like many others, where sometimes out of a dark time or an awkward moment, some beautiful things actually happen. And in this case, just a little over 3 years ago, I sort of recognized that I had a problem with alcohol. Not with the law or anything else, but something that I just didn't think suited me well. And so I decided to take care of it. And I went to rehab, and when I came out, I remember people saying, you know what, you should get in the habit of going to an AA meeting and being around people. And so when I started to go to these AA meetings, I also met people who were coaches. And so somehow the two played together, and when I began to really express an interest in coaching, I actually sat in the rooms of AA every morning at 6:45. Not only did I listen to the stories, but I began to practice my coaching. So my listening skills all of a sudden, being free of judgment, of really monitoring what I said, what I didn't say. So that was my aha moment.
Interesting. And that was 3 years ago.
Correct.
We both went to the same coaching school. CTI.
CTI.
Right. So that's an interesting path. I mean, everyone's got their story about, you know, I interview a lot of coaches on the show, and nobody started as a coach. They always had a couple of professions before something got them to, I think I would like to become a coach and make a difference.
Well, I think in my case, I had worked for Target as a senior executive for many years, in both the creative part of it and also in global sourcing. And so I spent a lot of time mentoring people both here in the United States and around the world. So I think without knowing coaching per se, I think I did a lot of coaching and a lot of mentoring.
And I think if you listen to people's stories, they have that same process where, gee, I was a mentor, and people came to me and they really sought out my advice. So that was another thing that people said, well, if this is this is that, maybe I'll become a coach.
Right.
So we had a lot of coaches out there. One of the areas we talked about when we were speaking was you have combined coaching and positive psychology. You've done both. What's the difference between both, if you will?
Certainly. I did the coaching first, and have just finished actually the certification as a positive psychology practitioner. And I guess the best way that I could explain it is that positive psychology is actually is the groundwork, the foundation, if you will. And so coaching is a method of expression. So if you think about it, the two are really very, very interlocked, very coactive. And for me, it seemed to be really just a beautiful balance. Some of that, I think, is because I'm a pretty optimistic person to begin with, and so it was yet one more natural gift.
So would you describe to our audience a little bit about positive psychology and how you weave that into your coaching as some examples.
Certainly. Positive psychology is a relatively new field. It's a little over, just about 30 years old, founded primarily with some real thought leaders, if you will, from the University of Pennsylvania. And when it started, the premise behind it was the previous part of psychology was really on diagnosis and the challenges with regard to that. All of a sudden, positive psychology comes along and says, what about all these other people? What would it take for people to go that are at neutral to actually thrive? And if we could get them to thrive, wouldn't it be even ideal to have people flourish? And so that's where this field has sort of taken off.
Okay. Can you give us examples of, because I could say that's what we do for coaching.
Yes.
It's exactly the same thing, where we help people who are surviving or, just at some place to really get them to a place of really thriving and being really successful with who they are and how they go out into the world. So positive psychology has a little bit of a different spin from what you're saying. So could you just expand upon it? Give us examples of how you would weave that into a coaching session.
Well, I think first of all, a lot of it has to do with the mindset.
Okay.
So right away, when we know that something is amiss, again, that idea of just reprogramming the thought process. Being aware of that mind chatter. And what I think is also very important here is that I've also incorporated mindfulness into this. So again, taking that time, being reflective, really looking inward, I think is a big part of positive psychology. Your interactions with other people.
Okay.
That whole idea of removing judgment.
So if you were working with a client, because, presence-based coaching is also about being mindful of what goes on and figuring out if you've got a situation, to really first be an observer and observe the situation and then look at the triggers and look at how you can reorganize that into change, right? So taking a coaching client so when you say positive psychology, what comes up for me is somebody's negative or somebody's got a view of a situation that this isn't good or this isn't right or whatever. How would you shift their mindset and use positive psychology on them?
Here's a very good example.
Okay.
Sometimes you'll ask people, how are you today on a scale from 1 to 10? And what's going on a scale from 1 to 10? And I think when you're able to, and somebody says, today I'm a 7. All right. So in a positive psychology frame of mind, you would say, okay, 7's pretty good. What would it take to be the 10? What is it that we would focus on? What are those other things that would make today an 8 or a 9 or a 10?
Okay.
So again, it's always looking, I think, at future opportunities, that whole idea of flourishing. Okay.
So would it be also in the present? If somebody was in a bad mood, how would you use that in the moment, in the presence? Because I could see using it, if you're a 7, how could you be a 10? What would that look like? What would that feel like? What things could you call into play that could really bring, let me think, I could be a 10 today, right?
Well, I think a very big component here, very simple but meaningful, is the opportunity or the ability to savor. And when we use the term savor, what we're saying, and you know where I'm going on this, is tell me something that happened and be able to really savor that. So today, I took my children to school, and when I was getting ready to close the door, my child turned back and said, "You know what, Mommy, I really love you." So all of a sudden, you take that's pretty empowering. So throughout the day, so when you get to the office and the papers aren't quite where they want, or this hasn't been signed, or that email didn't come in, wow, to go back and say, wow, my 4-year-old made a special point to come back to the car and say, "Mommy, I love you." That's savoring. And that's, again, that whole idea of positive psychology.
Interesting. Wow, that is powerful. Some good tidbits, really good tips here. So one of the things we were talking about, given that you told everybody here that you felt you had a bit of a drinking problem, that you went to AA to get through it. But out of that, I think, you talked about you are doing something called Recovery Plus. So first, can you tell us what Recovery Plus is? And then we'll get into how you're going to combine the coaching and the positive psychology in the Recovery Plus.
Certainly. Recovery Plus stakes its claim on really the transformative power and energy of recovery. So when I talk about Recovery Plus, I'm talking about people, like-minded people who have been through recovery.
Any kind of recovery.
Any kind of recovery. And so I have clients that have been through brain trauma, some eating disorders, the end of marriages. So anything where they have been through that stage, a stage of recovery. The plus part of it, and I say this firsthand, is this entire life that came to me, if you will, through the gifts and the skills of recovery. So I'm really looking. Recovery Plus taps into all these wonderful skills, the ability to be far more disciplined, to be goal-oriented, to be much more in control of whatever obstacle might be out there, and take that knowledge, that gift, and go to the next level. And I can tell you that from my own example here. So, I had the problem. I've dealt with it. I'm very committed to AA. And as a result of that, I'm sitting today as a coach, as a positive psychology practitioner. I've moved. I'm living in an entirely new community. I've seen a sense of financial stability that I never saw before. That's the plus.
So when we think of recovery, what we usually hear, not what you've said, is there's always grief attached to it, some kind of grieving. Is that true, or is that made up, if you will?
No, it's absolutely true. Now, for everybody, it can be a different...
Right, yes, yeah. Right,
so is it a lifestyle? Is it a pattern? Is it a group of friends? Something has to sort of shift.
Okay.
However, the plus is so rich that once you get a taste of that, what you all of a sudden you haven't given up anything, because you've got so much. There's so much potential.
Yeah, and so my hunch is that most people don't see the plus.
Most people do not.
And I really love the fact that, and it's something that actually has sparked me, because I was at a lecture last week with a gentleman named Dr. Peterson, and I can't think of his first name, who works with Google, and he talked about having friction and challenges and collisions that actually out of all of that you could grow. And his name is David Peterson, Dr. David Peterson, and really learn from it and get another set of tools, skills. So when I hear you talking about what came out of your challenge, was discipline and different focus and the moving and a different life for yourself.
A sense of community.
Is really interesting. And I've actually, after I listened to him, I have actually shifted a little bit my own coaching to really dig into how can these challenges really work for you, that you have to dig pretty deep to figure out what skills you have and strengths that can all of a sudden come to light and help you, not only through this, but to take them into life itself. So I actually found it to be so interesting, and here you are almost miming the same thing.
What's really remarkable in this, to your point, is that these are all gifts that were there. They're innate gifts, God-given, but all of a sudden, you, first of all, you have to bare your soul, and there's some things that have to go, and if it's shame or if it's judgments that have been made, but they go, and all of a sudden, there's this fresh slate. And if you see some of the things that are out right now with Ariana Huffington and this movement that she is on Thrive and Wisdom 2.0, we're all going back to a point of finding the simplicity and the growth opportunities in the present situation that we find ourselves.
Right. And I think for coaching, my clients, here they come and they tell me this story about what's going on and what they have to do, and I say, oh yay, an opportunity. And they go, because it's really exciting when you've got a situation or a block that you don't want to deal with, let's say in the workplace, and you avoid it. And when you have to look at it, if you don't uncover it and deal with it, it's going to show up. If you move to another company or another company, you're bound to find the same situation. And you're still not going to know what to do.
Correct.
Unless you really uncover and explore and are willing to shift whatever it is that's holding you back.
Right.
I guess that's, the plus could be anywhere,
But I think, to your point, the example you just gave, by not uncovering it, by moving it aside from this side to that side.
But we all do that.
We do. And so as a result, the authentic person that you are, or that I am, doesn't have an opportunity to unfold. That true, the true person in each of us, that good soul who wants to be the best employee or who wants to be the leader by example, we identify with those people because they are authentic. Our role models, the people that are role models are pretty authentic, not perfect.
Oh yeah, well,
but authentic.
So and can you distinguish the difference between when you're coaching and when you're doing positive psychology, or do they just blend together that it's seamless, if you will?
You know what, it's a very good question. And I think in the beginning I was a little bit more cognizant of the two. I would tell you today they're pretty much intertwined. They coexist, and again, I think the coaching gives it the structure that it needs, and they balance one another. Great.
So what else do you want to tell us and talk about in, I know that, I will say this and acknowledge you, that in 3 years, you've and I think you went through CTI training, you did their certification program, and you did the positive psychology. That's a lot for a short amount of time.
And yet, the most exciting time of my life, these 3 years.
Interesting. What made them exciting for you?
Well, I think first of all, I started at a very open and vulnerable spot. And so it was a free slate, and I wanted to have a new career, I wanted to have a second chapter, and I wasn't really certain. And all of a sudden, as life has it, one thing unfolds, and another unfolds, and I think in my case, I had the ability to be open. And so the coaching, I met people who were coaches. I didn't really know what a coach was 3 years ago. Not a clue.
Right.
But what was so remarkable was I was so drawn to these people. There was an energy, there was a force, there was just something I thought, I need to know these people. And so that's how I got into coaching, was really from an energy that I saw from other people. And I loved the coaching, the training, the CTI piece of it. The certification for me was really a natural. I really do believe so much in credentialing and really doing my part and standards and all of that. Positive psychology, I was at the time very much into mindfulness, and when I read the program, I was so taken with it because it integrated the two. What I loved about positive psychology is that it was practical. So every time I went to a class, every single weekend, anybody who knew me would see a difference. And so people would say, oh, today must be about seeing the best in everybody. And then the next weekend they'd say, oh, this must be about flourishing. They could see it in an evolution in me.
Wow. That's interesting. I mean, 3 years, that's a lot. I know I did my CTI training 11 years ago, and then I waited a year and a half before I did my certification with them. And then I went on to do the ORSC, Organization, Relationship, and Systems Coaching, so I could coach relationships. So I've done several things over 11 years. Every year I try to do one thing that will give me another perspective that I can use in my toolkit. So I'm not just one-dimensional as a coach like you. You've got coaching, you have practical psychology, positive psychology, sorry. So I try to draw upon different modalities, and I love that. But, to listen to you do it in 3 years, it's like exhausting. I mean, that's a lot. I mean, I remember going through certification, which is 6 months. I found that to be really difficult. So, and you added on the positive psychology.
Again, I think it was so natural, and I had the time and the space that I really couldn't get enough of it. So it was just that second opportunity.
So where are you with you're moving in that whole Recovery Plus arena?
So I have a practice right now, and a nice practice. But I am also, so that's on an individual basis with clients. I am also doing some motivational speaking.
Very nice.
And I'm very, very intrigued by that, because the motivational speaking is part of it is my story, so certainly a subject that's near and dear to my heart, but most importantly about that, it tells you, it shows you determination and survivorship and the ability that we are the masters of our own destiny. So that part of it I love. What I'm most interested in right now is I'm going to take yet another leap, and I'm going to do it this year. And the month of September is Recovery Month throughout the United States. And I have been looking for a vehicle, if you will, to really stake my claim, if you will, with Recovery Plus, and I thought, wow, this could be a great opportunity, and so much so that through some other things that I've been doing, some of the business part of coaching, which has been very important to me as well. Certainly all the theoretical, but also the practical part of it. You know, how do you have a business, and how do you account for things, and how do you advertise? So I'm looking, if you will, to reach out to some politicians in my area to see if there are grants out there, if there is some fundraising, some sponsorships. And I would like this to be, I'd like to start with one single event, or one single location, if you will, in the month of September, in my geographic location, which is in the eastern end of Long Island. And I believe that this has an opportunity to sort of move a little bit broader, a lot broader, in fact.
The recovery plus.
Yes.
I'm sure there are a lot of people, there are a lot of ICF people who do a lot of recovery coaching. It's really bigger than one would think on every aspect of recovery.
Right.
So you may be onto something. I mean, it's already there, but to jump on a bandwagon, that's pretty important. When you think about recovery, there's many different types of recovery. You know, we think of alcohol, or we think of drugs, but there's
eating disorders,
and gambling, and you know, there's I'm sure many others.
Or the one that's out there right now is this whole idea of technology.
Right. Right.
So I have a couple of young clients that they're not there necessarily willingly, but their parents have them right at the door. And
wow.
Yeah, this is something we're going to need to be prepared for. So
This
again,
addiction
yeah,
to technology.
absolutely, and that dependence, if you will.
And we all are. I mean, talk about an addiction.
Yep.
You know, that's our lifeline. You know, it's here to stay, and it's got its great pluses. However, it does have a lot of downsides.
Yes.
I mean, which have been talked about
And
on
it
many
and it has
occasions.
to do with balance.
Right.
And you know, what is the intent in all of this?
Right. Well, we are coming up to the end of the show, which goes very quickly, and this
Certainly
has been
has.
great. Any last minute things you'd like to say before I thank you for being on the show?
I just would love to take a second and just share my gratitude for this whole industry. For someone who knew nothing about it 3 years ago, to have walked into this and found a career, and found a home, and found a place, and an opportunity.
Thank you very much for being on the show. Really, really, I'm sorry I cut you short,
Nope,
but I
not at
wanted
all.
to say thank you to you for being here, and to thank the audience for watching tonight.
Thank you.